Hello, I have a question. What happens when an engineer sees a gap in education as a design problem to solve? Most of us think of engineers as builders of bridges, designers of systems, and creators of technology. But today's conversation explores how technical minds can create an impact far beyond traditional blueprints and specifications. Danielle, before we get started into your story, I would love for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current role.
My name's Danielle Passaglia. I am currently a mechanical engineer at an engineering and architectural consulting firm. My background is in architectural engineering, which is just a fancy way to say I learned a bit about every type of building system type of engineering. So, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, acoustic, structural, and you emphasize in one, but you basically get very well endeared into this niche field of the building design industry. I have been in this industry as a mechanical engineering design consultant for about 8 years. I help design the commercial mechanical systems for buildings, the heating, the cooling, the ventilation. Doesn't always sound exciting, but when you realize how much impact our buildings around us have, and you start to see how it's really made up of a ton of different design decisions and that impact one another and the efficiency and energy use of a building, you see that we're really doing things that impact people for the long term.
Okay, so how long have you been in the industry?
About 8 years, I went into the industry right after grad school. Like I said, I kind of knew with my major that this was the industry I wanted to go into. There's many different facets within our industry you could go into. You could be in sales or manufacturing or owner side, but design consulting always was really attractive to me because I felt like you are the artist in creating these buildings and designing them. You get a say in what goes into a building, and you really have the most impact to make a building sustainable and efficient and comfortable for the occupants.
Did you always know that you wanted to go into engineering?
No, no. I didn't even really think about engineering until my junior, senior year of high school. I grew up in a family full of teachers, and my dad was in real estate, and he kind of fell into that career. My oldest sibling went into business, finance route, and the rest of my siblings and my mom were teachers. So growing up, you think about who's around you. So for a while, I thought I would go into teaching, maybe teaching kind of higher math or either in high school or college because I really enjoyed math. But that was kind of it. And it wasn't until my junior year of high school where we were starting to think about colleges and programs that my mom advised me to check out engineering. So I really just started Googling different types of engineers because I'm a very visual learner and I couldn't grasp what they actually did from a day to day. And there's so many types of engineers. There's mechanical, there's chemical, there's civil. And at the time I found architectural engineering, and it seemed to combine mechanical engineering and electrical and structural, all these different types of engineering, but within buildings. At the time in high school, I've been taking auto drafting classes, CAD classes, hand drafting classes, construction classes, and I really enjoyed that artistry, that aspect of it, without necessarily wanting to be an architect. So when I came across architectural engineering, I thought it really combined the myriad of qualities that I really enjoyed from each segment, having that creativity, and you really are designing and painting a building just with ducts and diffusers and set up walls and finishes. So it seemed like a really great combination, better so than when I was thinking about maybe double majoring in mechanical engineering and architecture or something like that. So when I found it, I kind of went full throttle for it. I attended a camp, a summer camp at Milwaukee School of Engineering that kind of went through some of the different programs to kind of see, and I really enjoyed it. And it also helps that at the time, there were only about 11 accredited architectural engineering programs for colleges. Accredited means ABET, so I could get you have to go through an ABET accredited school program to be able to become an engineer in training and a professional engineer down the road. So it was also kind of nice because it really streamlined my decision making in terms of colleges.
Well, it's interesting because you said this a couple of times, even during this interview, this whole concept of looking at all of the different pieces that may go into a building system, looking at the systems and knowing a little bit about a lot of them, specializing in one, but understanding how those different pieces will intersect with each other.
Yeah, and that was always a really attractive quality. Growing up, I think I was always kind of a big picture learner. I kind of learned from the outside inward. In this case, with what we do, we're constantly coordinating, collaborating with other engineers and designers. It really is helpful to have that big picture idea, but then also understanding how each individual facet impacts others. And you really get into the weeds of understanding how something works.
I noticed that you served in leadership roles in some of the associations. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that's impacted your leadership development?
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the larger organizations I'm involved with is ASHRAE. It used to stand for American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, but now it's just ASHRAE because it's worldwide. And ASHRAE is an organization, like I said, for mechanical engineers or people within the HVAC industry. I started my involvement in that organization back in college at a student chapter level. There were a lot of good resources for students. You learned from industry professionals. There were some student design competitions. It just helps you get more experience for what you would be doing after school. I knew I wanted to stay involved in the organization. So when I graduated college and moved back to Chicagoland, I joined our local Illinois ASHRAE chapter. At first, it was a way to, again, just kind of stay sharp, get resources. And I went to first couple of the meetings and I realized I was really uncomfortable in the meetings because I didn't know anybody. I was a lot of middle-aged white men, and there wasn't a lot of diversity there, and you didn't feel like you had anyone to approach or talk to. It didn't feel very inclusive at the time, and I knew that if I wanted to get more involved, it was really key to build closer relationships with these people. So I volunteered to join one of the committees. I always was really passionate about student activities and STEM outreach. So they had a student activities chair, so and committee. So I joined them and I was helping them out. I started attending board meetings and meeting more people. And I started growing more comfortable attending these meetings because now I had people I knew that I could make conversation with and talk to. And it's a very welcoming organization. That was a great way to help get myself more comfortable and putting myself out there. And I just rolled with it with student activities. Like I said, I'm really passionate about STEM outreach, and I chaired that committee for a while. That was when I came up with the Lucy's Engineering series. And then I wanted to go through the executive branch of ASHRAE, which basically you roll on and you volunteer for 4 years going through the executive secretary, vice president, president, stuff like that. And it was just a goal of mine to be able to do that. I think we always need more women in ASHRAE and women presidents in ASHRAE. Our chapter was very fortunate. We had several female presidents before me. And when I was president, our whole executive branch was women, which was great. It was a great organization. It still is. And I'm still heavily involved with that. And then the other one I'm involved in, I'm on the board for AEI, which is Architectural Engineering Institute. And again, similar field, but they're really geared towards student development, especially for college levels and kind of being that liaison between college and industry. Every time I join in a leadership position, it's really to kind of make myself uncomfortable, to grow, to build network and see what other people are doing in hopes to learn from them.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, but there are a few key points that I want to get back to. You kind of glanced over this series that you developed for STEM outreach. Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit more about that?
Yes, definitely. So I wrote two books, Lucy's Engineering Adventure series. And the first book is Lucy's Engineering Adventure. It takes Lucy to a job site with her dad. and she learns all about how buildings are made and what goes into a building. The reason I created this book was when I was a student activities chair, we were really seeing a gap in our K through 5 literature and STEM resources. We had a lot for middle schoolers, for high schoolers. We do so much at a college level, but K through 5 is really lacking. And in my opinion, K through 5 is really the most critical time to get kids interested in STEM because in fact, for many young girls, they actually lose interest in and confidence in STEM by 3rd grade. So we want these kids to get excited, to think these questions and be introduced at a younger age. So I had brought up the writing a children's book in 2019 during a training, and it was well received, but we didn't really know what to do. ASHRAE hadn't published a children's book before, but I was really excited, so I took that with me. I wrote up a draft. I thought about maybe self-publishing, but I was already a little overwhelmed by the process, having never done this before, and ASHRAE has a publications committee, so they were really great. There was a lot of hoops to go through because it is a nonprofit organization. So we went through a lot of hoops, a lot of approvals, but we were able to publish Lucy's Engineering Adventure in 2021. And it's still one of ASHRAE's best-selling publications. It's a wonderful book, and I really wanted to emphasize not just Lucy, a young girl interested in engineering, but I also wanted to show Lucy, who has parents with mixed ethnicity, to just show some underrepresented people in our industry. And throughout the series, I try and continue that. Lucy's teacher is African American male because we are really short on male teachers, and especially just in general, people other than white people in industries in general, we need more, right? So I wanted it to be just a common thing, right? Like people and children can see people they identify with and want to pursue that.
Yeah, people are more likely to gravitate towards others that are like them or people that they feel they have things in common with. So I totally understand
Mhm.
wanting to increase the representation so that a young kid, they're looking at this, they will be attracted to the profession and they very well may get into it. You may never know the impact that your books are going to have on future generations of engineers. And that's amazing. That's an amazing legacy to have.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really fortunate. I'm very proud of it. And even in our industry today, we're seeing it. It is hard to increase diversity and inclusion just because your pool of applicants is limited. So if we really want to increase our diversity and who we're working alongside, we really need to start it at a young age and build these kids up to go into engineering so we have a larger pool of applicants. And like you mentioned, when you want to feel comfortable and you tend to empathize and identify with people like yourselves. So similar to when I was looking at jobs, I look to see, do they have female leadership at their jobs? Do they have people I can identify with to feel comfortable in? So building that up at an early age is
Yeah, and I think that is crucial in the reality in the STEM fields. We have a workforce shortage. There's
yes.
not enough people. Forget the
Mm,
diversity piece. There's not enough people to fill the jobs that we need. And so I think as an industry, we have to increase the pool of applicants, of people that are interested in these careers.
definitely, yeah. That'll be a huge segment. And again, I strongly believe it starts at a very young age.
I slightly want to shift topics a little bit. During our past conversation, you said something that really resonated with me. And that is if you don't feel challenged, you're probably not growing. So could you
Mhm.
expand on how that philosophy has shaped your career?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've lived by that statement throughout my tenure in the industry and even before that, but it didn't really come into words until I was looking at shifting jobs. And I have a mentor in the industry. I was explaining my nervousness of leaving my first job. The first job out of school, I had been there 7 years. It was a wonderful company. No real issues, except I felt like I wasn't growing anymore. I felt I had kind of plateaued in my growth. But the anxiety kicks in and it's like, is the grass always greener? Do you rock the boat? And she had told me that, when you feel scared, it just means you're growing. And that's where I kind of attributed, right? Without feeling challenged, you're not going to grow into a stronger person. And so thinking back on that, I think that was a great example of that because it can be scary, but also if you want to not be stagnant or be kind of in a same trajectory, you need to make change. And anytime there's change, it can be scary. Growing up, looking back on my life, there have definitely been points that were scary and intense, but I think were for the better thinking back just because I wouldn't be where I am without it. I grew up in a very loving household. My dad was sick for most of my childhood, and leaving for college out of state was a big challenge for me because I was nervous I would miss out on years that I wouldn't otherwise have. That was a challenge, but it was such an incredible opportunity. I'd gotten a full ride scholarship to my college. My parents were so proud of me. I ended up meeting my husband and having a very bright future from that education, so I wouldn't take it back for the world. So my dad passed away my senior year of college, and for many years, I held a lot of guilt about being away during that time because you could sense a buildup when I was home for holidays, things like that. You could feel that he felt like his time was limited. And so while I had great opportunities at school, while I had great internships where sometimes I had to travel, and I wasn't local to my family, I knew they were so proud of me. Uh, but those are times where you do look back and you're like, oh, it would have been so easy to stay close to home or stay by my family or even not necessarily go back to school for my last grad year. But I knew my parents were just so proud. And again, I wouldn't take back those years for anything. A lot has come from it. So definitely a challenge. Also, a reason why I wanted to come back to Chicago once I graduated, because I really wanted to be closer to family. But definitely there's always going to be challenges that you face. But again, you have to think about what you're gaining from it and what you're getting out of it. So I know my parents were very proud. My dad was very proud of me. And that's why I also probably like to have and create some type of legacy to look back on just so I can show that appreciation.
I just want to take a moment and thank you for just being vulnerable and just talking through that because it's not an easy thing to talk through when you are building your career, you're doing your thing, you're going to school, and there's stuff happening at home. It's not an easy thing to deal with at all. So, when I was going into my senior year of undergrad, the summer between my junior year and senior year, my father passed away. And it was a tough thing for me. And I want to say that part of it for me was what I would say being selfish. I wanted my father to see me walk down the aisle. I wanted him to see me graduate. That like meant a lot. I know he was proud of me, but I really wanted to see that. And when that didn't happen, there was a piece of me that felt like I was robbed. Right. And I carried that for about a year, but I can remember very vividly. I was actually in an internship out in Seattle, went to sleep, and I had a very vivid dream. And it was like I could hear my father saying, "Hey, I'm proud of you." It was for me a psychological piece where I could get closure.
It's funny you said that because I actually, not long after he had passed, had a dream where I woke up and he was standing in front of my bed, basically saying similar things of, I'm just so proud of you.
And I'm sure he was proud of the decisions that you were making, the woman that you were growing into. And I think that meant a lot to him. Not knowing him, I'm just saying I think that probably meant a lot to him.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's why in one of the books, one of the kids is named Ricky. Rick is after my father. So I try and put little things for both my parents.
Right.
Sally's in one of the books too.
So I'm listening to your story and I'm like, okay, she moved back to Chicago, wanting to make sure that she's building a legacy. And I can just imagine that your family is pretty important to you.
It is, yes. I'm very close with my family. I grew up in a very large Italian household, and I have my mom and my three sisters out in the area. My mom is the central focus point of a spider web that basically all information gets through. We're a very close family. We'll go out to the suburbs, or I'll have my mom come out here and we do family dinners and stuff like that. So family's always been a big importance, and we always try and prioritize that with work.
No. Are there any particular strategies that you use when you're looking to create that balance that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think of my time kind of in a pie chart. There's part of the pie that's for work, and there's part of the pie that's for friends and family. There's part of the pie that's for me, for my mental health, for my physical health. And within that, there are some weeks that parts of that pie are going to skew one way or the other. And I try to think of it as, there's going to be some weeks where work's a bit more domineering than other aspects of my life. But then in the other week, I'm going to be selfish and put time for myself or for my family or for, whatever our needs are. So understanding that pie will shift in terms of proportions, but it's okay to be selfish. I always think your loyalty should be to yourself first, and then to your family, and then to your job. I think setting boundaries to make that work is also very crucial.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I know the way that I tend to frame things is that self-care is not selfish.
Mhm.
Because if you don't care for yourself, that's actually being selfish. Because you won't be able to show up as your best self for those around you, for your job, for your
Mhm.
family, not even for yourself. So you need to be able to build that time that you're talking about, carve out that time for you so that you can recharge, be regenerated, so that you can show up as your best self.
Yes, definitely important. And I think it's important first and foremost, obviously, for us to set our boundaries and put those limitations on with our work or what we need at the time. If I have a really stressful week, I will talk with my husband and be like, listen, you're probably gonna have to take on a bit more of the burden of like house stuff this week. I'll make up for it next week. And just having a very understanding support around you, whether it's through partners or family or friends, is really key. And it's also key for employers to also understand that because, again, in a lot of households, a lot of the extra chores or household needs or childcare can sometimes resort to the woman doing them,
Mhm.
even if you're trying as much as possible to do 50-50. But it's also because our industry-based companies, businesses, they don't always necessarily think of men being a primary parent. So I'm having this idea that both parents are primary parents. There's not necessarily a secondary parent, and giving them equal opportunities. I wouldn't feel as burdened, for instance, to take maternity leave if I knew my counterparts were taking paternity leave of the same amount of time or any type of parental leave. My company does have a form of paternity leave. It's still not going to be quite the same at length of time as the women, but evening up those playing fields is going to be a really great way to help support people outside of the office, not just with parental leave, PTO, with support, with flexibility, anything like that.
No, I think I would agree with you. And there's probably some training that we all need to do to equip ourselves with the right words to communicate that to our employers, to other organizations. This is what I need for my family. This is what I need for us to be able to function the way that we need to function. I'm going to show up here at 100%, but this is
Mhm.
what I need for my family.
Yeah, and I think with advocating for ourselves and our needs, I think in today's day and age, information now is being a lot more transparent of what other companies are doing or what other people are doing. So we're getting more information to help subsidize those wants to share with our companies to show like, hey, this is what other people are doing. And if we want to stay competitive and back to attracting and retaining talent, we need to be competitive because this is what people are going to look for.
Yeah, that's true. But speaking of attracting and maintaining talent, another interesting point that you brought up when we talked before was this whole concept around not only looking at what teams do wrong, you know how you do a post-mortem and you're looking at what are all of the things that went wrong, but
Yeah.
also doing that type of exercise to look at what went right. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So our industry is very focused on like lessons learned. We have RFIs, which are requests for information. We have project follow ups where we just talk about what went wrong, how we can stop it and not do it next time, things like that. I don't know necessarily where the mindset of not showing recognition for work done well came from. It could be for a very old mindset earlier in the industry. Other industries also might have this prevalence where we don't necessarily tell people good job or that they're kicking butt or anything like that. It's kind of like it's expected. Your expectation is greatness, and anything less is something to be commented on. But I think it's a vulnerability that people aren't always comfortable sharing either. So I think getting into this idea to be mindful that other people can really thrive on recognition and engagement that they're doing well is something that employers and supervisors and managers should really take into account. I mean, I grew up wanting validation from my parents or my teachers. Getting an A on a paper for me was validation. It showed that I did something well. I studied, I worked hard, and if I want more A's, I have to do it again.
Mhm.
We're going from this culture of schooling that positive validation is really key to being a successful student and getting into successful schools, and then we go into our careers and we don't get any more A's or gold stars, but what we can get is a good job or you did great or I really enjoyed working with you on this. Those are things we can still bring forth from what we've learned growing up and condition us to still want to be in a positive environment and continue that success. So I think that's really important.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I know when I take clients through a process, whether it's an end of year review or quarterly review, we look at what went well and why, what didn't go well and why, so we look at both sides of that. I think part of it may be human nature that we focus on the things that we do wrong that tends to grab our attention. And we don't pay as much attention to the things that we do right.
I feel like it's that idea of you're doing it right. I don't need to comment on it. You'll just still do it.
I think it is, but I also think it goes deeper than that because it doesn't just show up in how those managers treat teams or how organizations manage people. It shows up in how we reflect on ourselves and
Mhm.
what we think about ourselves. You know, 9 times out of 10, people can remember the things that didn't go right today versus the 900 things that did go right.
Yeah.
What they're going to gravitate towards is the thing that didn't go right. So one of the tools or something simple to help you kind of keep momentum in that area is keeping a gratitude journal. What are you
Mhm.
grateful for? And it doesn't have to be something where you're writing 5 paragraphs. It could be just 5 key points of what I'm grateful for today.
No, that's a great idea. Yeah, my husband and I sometimes if we get into our winter kind of slouch, we need to sometimes remind ourselves of 5 things we're proud of that
Yeah.
we've done. And that's our way to remind ourselves like, okay, I really kicked butt at this, or I really tried in this, or I'm a really kind person. So that counts.
It can.
Yes, it counts. Any of those reminders are great.
Well, Danielle, I really appreciate you taking the time for this interview. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Any parting words with the listening audience?
Just thank you for having me, and I hope people get something out of this as much as I do talking about what I'm proud of and our journey through this crazy life. So thank you.
What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. They can find me on LinkedIn, Danielle Passaglia.
Okay. And we'll include a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, as well as a link to your book. So we'll make sure that we grab that. I often will do this in shows where I will flip things around and I will ask you, do you have any questions for me?
I see this beautiful wall of photos behind you. Can you talk a bit more about it?
Yes. So for those of you that are watching on YouTube, people are like, oh, let's see the beautiful photos behind you. So the behind me is a wall of my family and friends. So their family is very important to me. Part of the reason why I developed this whole concept of designing and living a life where you're winning at work and at home, because you can have success in both areas. There is a
Mhm.
way for you to do that. And one of the things you talked about, Danielle, is really key. And that's the communication while you're in the middle of that tough season or that busy season, talking to your family, letting them know this is what's going on. We think that our spouses and our families can read our minds, but they
Mhm.
can't. And so that communication is absolutely key.
Yeah,
So
what a great ecosystem of support you have.
thank
And then I guess my other question was just how did you build this podcast and company up?
a lot of it, a lot of it goes back to when my youngest child was born. So he's 16 now. So let's go back 16 years. He's born at 26 weeks and 1 day. He's 1 pound, 14 ounces. I'm working up in Washington, D.C. at the time. I had a commute. My wife and I, we had a good relationship, but it was strained because I was focused more on work than I was at home. And so I had to ask myself three questions. And these are three questions that I start most engagements with. And so I asked myself, do I want to win at work? My answer was yes. And I was. I was traveling all across the country, international trips, everything was jiving. It was great. The next question was, do I want to win at home? And I did. But the third question was, am I? And I couldn't answer that question yes. And because I couldn't answer that question yes, I started to build boundaries. I started to put things in place that would allow me to create the situation that I wanted to have success both in my career and at home. And so I was able to successfully do that for 15 years. And then I got to that point where I wasn't challenged and I wanted to go after a new challenge. So I decided to launch Engineer Your Success, where I help engineers, key executives, company owners design and live a life where they can win at work and at home. We do this through executive coaching, leadership development, and we also do private internal podcasts for companies where we do learning activities and personal development type stories in those podcasts. It's been a great run for me. It's been a little over probably about 2.5 years since I've been doing the business full time, and about 3.5 years since I've been doing the podcast.
Well, it's a wonderful thing you're doing. I think that's something we need in the industry. So I think it's a great ad.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to end this podcast like
Yeah.
I end every podcast, and that's this. Many people know what to do, fewer people know how to do it. And there's a select group of people that follow through and are doing it, and they're living the life of their dreams and leaving a legacy like you, Danielle. I want to thank you for being part of that select few.